Hi there, welcome to How Do I Explain This? Reporting live from the Atlanta suburbs. Um, I am hoping that this is my last week at home. Fingers crossed, guys. Please. I don't know how many more manifestations I have in me. I keep speaking it into existence. The law of assumption is running overtime over here. Resources are running low. Hope is still high. Please, please. Anyways, I think that's enough begging for now. But what I wanted to talk about today was talking about the importance of sharing your story. I feel like this is the heart of what I do and share and how I work with people. And I have had the pleasure of meeting a lot of amazing creatives around New York over the past few months. And something that's always come to the forefront after I've had these conversations with people is like, oh, they don't know how to tell their story. And not in a no shade way at all, because I'm still learning how to tell my story as everyone else is. However, I recognize that we don't really place much of an importance on this important skill. It's not a skill, but it's an important part of who you are, to be able to articulate your lived experience and to articulate what it is your lived experience has shown you about yourself and shown you what it is that you are meant to be doing and the path you're meant to be on and the way in which you are meant to create and live your life, you know? And when I started doing the work that I am doing, I initially came into this space because of honestly how the startup world was back when I had started working at startups. You know, like in the early, like, I would say like 2015, 16 time, right? Don't quote me on that. But there was a big like resurgence of all these like smaller startups, all being like people driven, mission driven, all around this founder story. And it really created a shift in the way that we viewed our kind of role at a job. I think prior to that, when I was in consulting, it felt like my options were to grind so that I can make it to the top and make enough money so I can retire, or I would just say, I'm here for a check, do what I need to do, and I'm clocking out. So, of course, I went the other route. Of course, I went the other route. But when I started working with a specific payer out in Albuquerque, and fuck that state and city, yo, New Mexico is a weird place. Don't go. And if you're from there, I'm sorry. Are you okay? Anyways, when I was working with this pair in Albuquerque, I remember we did a digital health project. They were thinking about kind of expanding into the digital health space, and this was also right around the time that all of these bigger startups or smaller startups started coming up and people were really buzzing about all the new cool technology that they could do. And so I remember doing a competitor analysis. And so I actually had to like do the whole landscape view of all of these like players and understand how they work. And I tell you, that was a mistake they did giving that to me, because in learning about all of these digital health spaces, which I would have never done on my own had it not been something I had to do for work, I was exposed to another thing, another area I felt so called to go towards. And what I loved about it was the technology. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a tech geek. I love new technology. It was the way that they talked about their people and talked about all the role that that person had at the job, and being a person who cares deeply about how she does her work and how she can support her team. You know, I think that was a big part of consulting, was the teamwork aspect that I loved. Being a part of a company now that actually cared about this team mentality made me feel finally seen in my work. And so I applied, and of course, I started working at Oscar. And in working at Oscar, it was really interesting to just see that no matter how shitty the work was, people were like but we have to get it done because there's people who need health insurance. There's people who need us. Like, we are the good guys. And, that really did help me through a really shitty time period working there. It was the worst job, bro. It was crazy. It was crazy. And then in transitioning over then to the direct-to-consumer world, right? They even expanded that further, that whole idea of now the founder story, the pain point solution architect, right? Like, think about how many companies came out with, I didn't see a solution for this, so I made this. And that was really what drove the culture of the jobs that I had there. And I think when I was at my job at Keeps, it was the first real employer where I saw myself there for a while. It was the things that I loved doing, right? It's kind of what I'm doing now, where, you have an idea of a launch or an initiative and you kind of go to me and I do the analysis. I check out what it would look like. What's the strategy around the launch and considerations and all of this stuff. And then working with people to build it out. I loved it. But right around August of 2021, of 2022, actually, 2022. Damn, that was a crazy time period. I hate that time. Right around that time, I was tasked with launching an anti-aging product. And a bit of background, Keeps was all about being a specialized hair care solution brand, only for men, only hair care products, unlike our other competitors like Hims and Roman. That was all about, extending outside of that and going into sexual health and skincare. And at my company, it was a portfolio company, so we had Keeps. However, we had our own skincare and our like other brands that covered other conditions. And so I always felt I was very proud that the company decided to just stick and stay in this one particular market and double down. However, things change, as does life, and I was tasked with launching an anti-aging product. To give you a bit of background, the last launch that I did was like pretty successful. Made like almost $1 million in 3 months, which was a high. And so for them to task me with this, my first response was absolutely not. Because how can you launch this anti-aging product without changing your brand story, without changing the foundation of the brand that you built and the company you built? We have to be able to do that first for our audience, because we cannot position something or share something that doesn't fit the scope or the storyline that we've painted out to them. And I was told to shut up because I didn't make the money decisions. And apparently money makes the world go round. And they had to report to the board or whatever. I don't even know, shareholders. I wasn't even public. I don't even know what you call them. The board of directors or whatever. And not only was I told to shut up, I was told to launch this new product within 1 month. And if you have launched products before, how? I would say minimum 3 months. And so what did I do? I said, okay, bet. And that was the worst month of my life. Honestly, actually, I can't say that. I've had a lot of worse months. It's not good either. But I worked overtime like crazy. Mind you, that was only one work that I was doing, and I didn't have a manager at the time. So my manager was the CEO. I had no one on my team. Everybody was yelling at me, asking me why we were doing this and how pointless it was. And I just had to take it all from everybody on every end, from the CEO asking me when things are going to get done and what's the status, to the product team, to the developers, to my pharmacy team asking me, what the F is this? This is a waste of our time. And so I had to play both sides. And fortunately, we did launch. Unfortunately, we only garnished 60 products, like 60 sales within that first month and a half. And we lost so many people. I remember looking at our retention rates. And again, that was a consideration I put in this launch consideration deck that I created, where I was told to shut up, and they didn't care about the retention. And then I launched, and then I took a mental health leave right after. I remember that being the last week of the month, and it was on a weekend, and I know my body is at the point of burnout when I am throwing up. I cannot contain or hold down anything. The idea of eating food scares me because I get nauseous, and I hate being nauseous. And I ended up having to call my manager shaking on launch day, like literally shaking because my body was physically unable to eat. And I had starved and was locked in my room the whole weekend crying like a baby. And I remember calling him and saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. Like just having an anxiety attack over the phone and thinking that my career was completely ruined. But you know what? I will have to say, shout out to him because he handled it really well. He told me to take a deep breath, that he was going to step in, and I need to take my time and I need to take a break. He even recommended a month, and my dumbass was like, no, 2 weeks. I'll be back in 2 weeks. And he's like, okay, we'll see after 2 weeks. And he said, just clock out and I will handle everything. And so thank you to Steve. That is the one thing I will have to say. He made me feel very reassured that I wasn't a failure, and that what I was tasked with was crazy, and he was impressed that I have been able to make it this far. Like, bitch, did you think I was not gonna make it? Was this what you planned on, for me to tap out? If you knew it was bad, why didn't you stop it from the beginning? Anyways, he was nice at the end, and I took a mental health leave. And in taking a mental health leave, that's kind of where I had to come to terms with my anxiety, because it was really bad. And it wasn't just work anxiety, it was general life anxiety, but more so anxiety of not understanding who I was. And fast forward to a few months after that is when I had multiple tower moments of my life where every other aspect of my life came crashing down. I'm talking work, romantic, friendships, personal, family, financial, everything came crashing down in the span of 3 days. And it wasn't until I was left with nothing in July of 2023 that I really had to take a hard look at my life and understand where it is I was going. And I was doing Pilates training randomly. That was something that came up when I was crashing out in December. I remember, telling myself that the one thing I had control over is how I felt. And so I was very big on working out, and I loved Pilates at the time because it was the first time where I left a workout class not feeling exhausted or beat up or feeling like I lost a part of my lungs on the floor or on the treadmill. And I went into teacher training, and teacher training was honestly the biggest blessing from God, because that is what changed my life. And in that, and I'm not going to go further, that then led me down a path of understanding what it is I wanted to do with my life. And taking an inventory of my own work experience, I started thinking about what are some of the things that drove me, that gave me that fire that I have lost, right? And I always think about how I am when I first start a job, and I get really excited. I'm like, I'm going to be the best person out there. But it's also excitement. It's like I get to learn something new. I'm in this new space. I am able to meet new people. And so I started thinking back to all of my work experiences and what the initial fire or spark was that led me to those jobs. So what I ended up finding out was the common theme of, the passion behind it, the why behind what they were doing. When I understood the why behind my work, that's when I was able to create a connection and establish meaning to it and feel as though I was doing something of impact, of purpose. Like, it wasn't just to click clack away just to do Excels. Like, I was moving the needle, as they would love to say, in the things that I was doing. And so when I sat back and said, okay, then where did it all go wrong? It was always money. I can't say I hate money, but it was when the why got so blurred, because the dollar signs, because profit, because the shareholders were demanding things that did not fit the initial why. And I think to that example of the anti-aging launch, like if I had not done the anti-aging launch and had that breakdown in August, would I have still been at Keeps? I don't know, maybe. But I always turn back to that moment and realizing and seeing the difference between a launch that I did where it was 100% in line with the why of the business versus a launch that wasn't and led me to that physical state that I was in, that made me realize how important it is for us to know our stories and to know our whys. And so when I decided to go and do brand strategy on my own, that's what I chose to focus on, was understanding that person's why. And I go through this whole process as everyone does of, looking at other people and how they do their brand strategy and all this jazz. And for some reason, it all, as you can tell, was cookie cutter and wasn't necessarily resonating with me, because your why is not, I didn't have this, therefore I did this. Your why is more deeply rooted in what it is you were always seeking in your life. And you then hit this one point that was more of a turning point. It was like, I can't handle it anymore. So to me, that pain point to solution is like the last straw. And there's a lot more that has been building up to it. And maybe I think about it because of, in that lens of thinking, because that's how I process my emotions, or that's what gets me to take action, is when I'm fed up, right? It's like things that are slowly stacking up and stacking up and stacking up that all have a central theme around them that then get me to my boiling point where I'm saying, I'm done. I'm done being a victim. I'm done waiting around for someone else to do it. I'm done living my life like this. And so when I kind of realized that, I decided, okay, let me do my own self. And then in kind of doing my own self and also pulling in psychology as I love, I kind of reached the point where I went down my own story. And there's this one specific memory of me being a kid outside crying because I didn't give a jacket to my dad that I misplaced, or I misplaced a jacket that he gave me from someone who gifted him a jacket. And I remember the hurt that I caused him because of my disregard for his gift. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of money. So for him to give me a nice leather jacket, granted, it was 3 sizes too big, was him doing the best that he could. And it was winter, right? And me being a 7-year-old, I said, I can't wear that. So I tossed it somewhere in the house and I couldn't find it when he randomly asked for it. So yeah, I mean, I deserved it. But I didn't deserve to get put outside. But what I recognized, I just remember feeling that girl a lot of times. That was a memory I always remembered as a kid. And I remember that girl telling herself that she will never ever disappoint a person ever again in her life. That she will always be there for people. She'll always love them. She'll always go above and beyond. But she will never ever put herself to a point where she can never clock what this other person needs and make sure that she's able to give it to them, so that they can never abandon her and never be able to give her the love that she deserves. And so when I kind of think back to that, or when I also thought and kind of sat with that memory, I think it was the first time I did that in a really long time. It was overwhelming because I recognized that that is that girl that's still, that's the girl that's driven all of this. That pain that I felt when I was a child has pushed me into all the places and people and situations I've been in because of wanting more for myself, but also placing all of these extremely high expectations on who it is that I think people want me to be and how I should show up and how I should create my life to fit that mold. And when I think about making even that switch from business, from, medical school to being in consulting, that was the first time where I was like, I'm doing something for myself. And that was so scary, right? And then making that transition from consulting into the healthcare tech space, that was another decision I made for myself because, granted, I don't know what this market looks like, and I'm leaving a very good cushion job security job for that risk. And so when I started to look back at all my kind of all the risks that I have taken, it's always been me going against that little girl, me saying, I don't care about what other people's expectations are of me right now because I'm at a point where I cannot handle this anymore. And at my consulting job, it was getting to a point that I could not handle how monotonous, how boring and tedious and exhausting the work was. And when I finally found something that sparked my excitement, why would I not pursue that? Even if I can't explain the exact role that I do to my mom and dad still, and nor do I know what my trajectory is because it's still a new industry, I'm willing to take that risk. And similar to when I decided to leave my job at Keeps and work for myself, I had that spark again. And when I had that spark again, that's when I knew I needed to make a change in my life. Because when that spark comes, when I recognize that spark, I am also recognizing that I'm comfortable and I need to get out of my comfort zone and I'm not happy. When that spark is back, I forget that it left in the first place. That's huge. Like that spark should not leave me, but I guess not spark, but that flame, that fire that I've always had should not be diminished or put down in the work I do. It may ebb and flow, but it was very dormant for a really long time. And the only times it came up was when I was ready for my next chapter, ready for the next thing. And so, in kind of understanding my story and understanding who that little girl was that has been driving all my subconscious actions and behaviors and thoughts leading up to my creation of my business, I recognize that this can't just be my own thing. Like, I can't be crazy. Like, I just recognize all those patterns. I wonder if that is the same thing for other people. And so when I started doing that for clients, it was true, in getting them back to that version of themselves. They recognized what it is that they needed in that moment and what it is that they were avoiding. And, that protective mechanism that came up that has kind of guided all of the actions and behaviors they've taken up until this day, up until this moment in which they are stuck or they have lost the flame or they don't know how to go into this next level of their life, though they feel like it's time for that. And so that's what I do with people, right? People who are stuck and are looking for that fire, that flame to come back and to understand why it is that they keep getting themselves stuck in these patterns. And so that's why I say that's an element of why I say it's important to know your story, because you can see the ways in which you've been stuck in the past, the ways in which you've been able to get your spark back. But you are also able to really start showing that version of yourself compassion and forgiveness, because that's key. And what I do, and something I always encourage my clients, is when we take this journey kind of back to childhood, we not only sit with that girl or that boy, we understand what they were experiencing and also give light to the circumstance or the after effect or the result of that situation back from childhood. And what I mean by that is they're able to sit with that kid, and now with an adult's pair of fresh eyes, they are able to see the situation differently. They're able to see that what their mom and dad did to them wasn't because of them, or wasn't because they aren't deserving of love, or they were unworthy, or they, deserve the things that happened to them. They're able to give that person forgiveness and understanding because they're able to see things for what it is. They're able to zoom out and see the big picture of it. In that instance, for my own sake, like if I think back to that time, I've been able to sit and zoom out with understanding the grand scheme of it all. My parents were young. They didn't have money. I was a kid who lost a jacket. They thought it was a really important jacket and a sign of care and love that they gave me. And because I wasn't able to reciprocate or see the value of what they've done for me at the time, that wasn't them taking it out on me. They were trying their best, and they apologized. But that moment stuck with me because I couldn't see that. I couldn't see beyond the fact of what they were doing to me and why they were doing that. They were doing that to me because I felt then that I was deeply wronged. Like, I felt deeply unlovable and felt deeply that I wasn't deserving of love unless I did something. And so I tell my clients kind of in that moment to sit with that reflection. Once we kind of uncover it, right? We go through in the process. When we do it, we kind of start, backwards, and then we kind of reach that moment of like, this is the root pain. This is the aha, like this is where it all stemmed from. I also kind of then help them see their protective mechanism as a gift. I say this is in a person who believes that we're all born with gifts. Of course, I love superpowers, and I think everyone's a superhero in some instance. And we are all born with a gift or something about ourselves that's deeply unique. And once we are able to meet that person at where they were at and give that version of themselves peace, something beautiful happens in which I get them to see that that protective mechanism has been a gift for them all along. And within that is the opportunity to also share that gift with other people. So, to give you an example, in my instance, something that I have always known about myself is how deeply perceptive and observant I have always been as a kid and even as an adult, though that has definitely went away a little bit and came back. But as a kid, I was always big-eyed, stared at everything, clocking everything, and I then kind of have that incident happen, and then what became observant and curiosity then turned into hyper-vigilance. And so that hyper-vigilance is what kept me protected from people, places, or things that were wanting to do me wrong or weren't in line with me, or may have made me feel as though I wasn't living up to other people's expectations because I wasn't aware or I hadn't clocked all the pieces together, and being perceptive as to like how I could be there for people and care for people would have not been there if I had not had the gift of being observant and perceptive as a childhood. And so for my clients, I kind of show them that the protective mechanism is actually their gift, and it is now on them to ensure that they can bring that gift to life. So in that example of how my observant, curious gift as a child turned into hypervigilance, I do the same thing with my clients where I get them to see what their gift is and also to tap back into that kid-like version of themselves. Something beautiful happens when you are able to give that version of yourself the love and care that it's been desperately wanting for so long. And when you give that person that space and you're able to release all of the anguish and pain and hurt that has been built up from the protective mechanism, always kind of getting up in the way of the things that you want to do, you clear space and you make room for light to come in. And when the light comes in, that's where I recommend them to tap back into that childlike state that they were. They have the ability then to remember the versions of themselves that they thought that the world was their oyster. They are able to tap back into the visions, into the dreams that they had as kids, into the aspirations that they deeply wanted. And my favorite part is to always show them how those aspirations that they wanted as a kid is kind of what they're doing right now. It's my favorite thing, It's like they've always wanted to be an entertainer, and then you see right now that they are in a performance-related role, right? Even if it's not necessarily on Broadway, they could be on a fitness studio, or they are making content, and they are just surprised by how that version of them has really been with them since literally up until they started working with me. And so what I love to do at this point is we uncover the gift, we heal the wound, and then we get the little version of them, and it's like the three of us, and it all skipping back into time. And as we start skipping back into time, we think back to all those key moments and triggers that they've had in their story, and we help show them how that story was needed, how that story was a stepping stone, a lesson learned, a thing that they had to do as part of their journey, as part of their story, because that builds up who they are, and what it is that they're doing will be able to pull from that. And so I say that when I say pull from that, I meant more so as when you now kind of get them back to present day, they figure out who they are, they figure out what the why was, and now they see all the instances that they once thought were negative as positive. And then those positive instances are then used as ways that they could create their brand and how they want to help people. They want to help people not experience what they experienced back then. And this is how they're making sure that they're not experiencing it now. So really what I do is help uncover the why, like the deep core pain behind why they are doing all the things that they've done, and what their gift is to teach or to share with others, and then ultimately understand who it is that they want to help and why they want to help them, and help them not experience one thing and what then to experience. What is this new promise, this new path, this new way of being that they want to provide these people, because they wish that they had that back then. You know, they wish they had that person back then who was able to say the things that they needed to hear, or to create the product or brand that they needed in the world, so that they could feel seen and they could, you know, feel as though they're not the only one struggling with something. And all that to say is that's really why it's so important that we go all the way back to childhood and really figure out that core pain, because that core pain has really been the thing that has led us to where we are at today. And that core pain, while it is a very specific, unique experience to you, it is the same emotional strain or wounding that other people have, a lot of other people. I think back to a lot of the clients that I've had, and while their stories have been immensely different, there is a correlation between some of the key themes and wound patterns that I've exhibited, that I've seen, and how they have then kind of been able to build a brand as a thank you to that person, right? I see it as all the patterns and all the things we've exhibited are not specifically unique to us, but what is specifically unique to us is what we do with it. And with my clients, it's always what I recommend with them is, now that you have seen your story, now that you have healed from your story, and now that you are empowered by your story, now it's your turn to write the rest of the story. It's your turn to say what it is you're choosing to take from those stories and from the past, and how it is you plan to build your future or your next step or your next venture from. So I always get my clients to do this process. They always come to me saying social media or marketing, and, you know, typical people can jump right into the whole strategy and all the optics around how to like get their email list bigger. But before I do any of that, I always have to go through this whole journey with them, because not only are they able to see themselves in a different light and be empowered to move from a different place, it also allows me to see the human behind the brand and make it my point to bring out that human experience in how they build their brand, how they create their content, how they market themselves or what products they offer, and also how to create their own life. Like, that's a really fun part, is now understanding that we get the ways in which they kind of fall back into those protective mechanisms, and how in the past that has led them to getting stuck, and then what they do to get unstuck. And so I love being able to work with them creatively to pick and pull out those pieces of their story to be the basis of their brand foundation. right? What elements of your story do you want to include? What experiences do you want to share that you can help others overcome? What emotions or mindsets or thoughts did you encounter on this journey that you want to make sure that no one else has to encounter through your work? Or what system did you create for yourself unknowingly that you can then help other people create for themselves so that they can also progress on their journey? So much comes from our stories. So much comes from it. Like, not only are you able to know and see your past for what it is, you're able to heal from it. You're able to make space for the new to come in your current reality. You see the ways you've gotten stuck. You see the ways you've gotten unstuck. You see your lessons and your hurt from a different lens, and you're able to give yourself compassion then, but also compassion now. You're able to believe that you went through the ringer so much in your life, and so much beauty came out of every little fit or crash out episode. And when you highlight that and when you see that, it gives you the persistence and perseverance and the belief that you can tackle whatever is ahead of you in this new path, in this new route. And when you can actually make peace with your past, you're really able to step forward into this new chapter. And you're able to step forward with confidence in yourself because your past isn't gone, but your past has helped provide you kind of the guardrails for this path that you want to create for yourself. It helps you create the steps and the foundations of each step, right? As I help pull back their story, they uncover parts of themselves that they've forgotten that they want to add to this journey. They remember the values, the morals that they've had with themselves and some of the decisions they've made in the past, though maybe they weren't the best, but they're able to start seeing the other aspects of kind of the trigger points or situations that they've had and realizing I made these decisions from a place of heart, actually. And while it may have not turned out so great, I cannot continuously shame my heart for the decisions that it makes. And when you are able to do that, you're able to then start this new path and be heart led. And that's always my goal with my clients, is to not only get them to see the version and the light that I see within them, but they're able to uncover their gift. They're able to dream bigger. There's nothing that makes me more happy than getting them to dream bigger. But they leave feeling like they are ready to take on the world and that their path is uniquely theirs, and that I'm always here to give them the reassurance and reminders that they need of how they operate. You know, I think it's a beautiful relationship I get to have with these people, with my clients, not these people, that's rude. But it is a beautiful thing to have had gone through all those dark moments alone and for yourself to sit in that discomfort by yourself at that time, but to now have a guide or to have to be have a companion on this journey of revisiting those wounds and having someone show you that light and show you how strong you were in those moments, and be able to then bring that light back into this current day, into this current work that we're doing. It's beautiful. It's nice to see how great their imaginations get and how big the world looks and is, you know, their oysters. The world is their oyster, and I feel very grateful that I get to do that every day. And so that is why your stories, as I said, are important, because there's nothing that can shake you off of your path if you know who you are and what you've gone through, and you've made peace with what you've gone through, and you know what it is you need to do, not necessarily need to do, but at least want to do in this chapter. So all that to say, get to know yourself. It won't hurt to sometimes look back at some of those big moments you thought you were bold and maybe landed on your face. I've had a couple of those. But in learning how to pick yourself back up and making note every time you pick yourself back up, the process of falling down will start feeling like a trip. And then the trips then start feeling like a little like, whoop. And then sometimes you don't even clock it. and you just say, it is what it is, and you keep going with life. So, yeah, I urge you guys to just find a specific memory. But think back to the first time you were hurt as a kid. If I want to get deep, think about the first time you realized love was conditional. That's usually what gets people. But outside of that, with love, as always, Manny.